should we be paying more attention to what's happening right now across the northern border?
Yeah, so Israel is now engaged in a multi-front war between Hamas and Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, the northern front with Lebanon, conflict with Iran, Yemen. And so it's hard to know where to turn your gaze at any given moment. I think the expectations for Israel and what the Israeli government has really laid out vis-a-vis Lebanon is still going to be relatively limited, meaning there's no intention to reoccupy Lebanon in any meaningful way. Rather, the intention is really to create a buffer zone in the south so that Israelis feel safe in the north of Israel. Israel's goal is essentially threefold: to allow the nearly 100,000 displaced people in the north to return to their homes, to deplete Hezbollah's arsenal and to weaken the group and to push it back. And I think we will continue to see Israel pursue those objectives in Lebanon. The question now is how they deal separately with Iran.
Well, I want to ask you then about the planning for a response to Iran, because, of course, all of this overlaps. Joe Biden got a lot of people worked up today in the oil market when he took a question from a reporter outside the White House asking if they were considering strikes against Iran's oil infrastructure. He said it's being discussed. Sent crude oil up about 5%, Carmiel. And during his rally today in Michigan, Donald Trump weighed in on this as well about what President Biden said about attacking oil installations. Let's listen.
He said, well, they'll have to do, I don't want them to do anything, Israel, but as long as they don't destroy the nuclear weapons on the other side. I said, did he say that? Isn't it supposed to be the opposite? No, as long as you do destroy the nuclear weapons.
Recalling a day earlier, Carmiel, when Joe Biden said absolutely no when he was asked about targeting Iran's nuclear program. Are we then to believe that oil is on the table, or should he not have said that?
Yeah, I think that what Biden has also made clear is that the U.S. administration is going to advise the Israelis on what to do, but ultimately does not control what the Israeli government is going to do in its retaliation. There are a number of options that they are considering. There's a huge amount of domestic pressure in Israel to go after Iran's nuclear facilities. This, of course, is the key existential threat that Israel views to its survival. They have significant amounts of intelligence and surveillance on those nuclear programs, and it is a real and serious target for them. That, of course, is very concerning for the international community, could have massive reverberations. And so the U.S. is pushing Israel to consider kind of lesser steps in terms of how they can respond. So that could include, as you said, attacks on the oil markets. It could include targeted killings of leadership. We could see some types of airstrikes. It has a lot of options at its disposal, none of which the U.S. would view as optimal. But at the same time, the U.S. has made clear they're going to stand by Israel. They had, of course, been pushing for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, have been working to de-escalate this conflict, but also understand that they're going to be with their ally no matter what they do.
Stuxnet was almost 20 years ago, Carmiel. I couldn't believe it when I realized that today. But I wonder if this idea of conducting a cyber attack, for instance, which Iran would surely deny ever impacted anything, might be the more effective route. I wonder if that, in fact, is on the table as well, a cyber attack against centrifuges or some element of Iran's nuclear program.
I think that nothing is off the table at this point, and I would expect to continue to see cyber warfare between these countries. At the same time, I do think Israel is eager to reestablish deterrence. The ballistic missile strike was significant. And while we're still hearing information about exactly what targets were struck, exactly what was hit, this was not small. This was not a minor response from the Iranians, and I would expect at least a proportionate response from the Iranians. Or excuse me, from the Israelis to the Iranians. I think the other question here for the Americans is going to be whether or not they're involved or taking a step back and letting these things happen.
Is it possible to respond in a way that ends the tit for tat, or is this our new reality?
I think that we are going to be looking at this as the new reality for a long time. I think the question is simply going to be, how often is the tit for tat going to happen? And is it just going to be tit for tat, or is this going to escalate only further? And I think the hope of the international community at this point is to avert a World War III rather than this sort of smaller scale war of attrition.
Yeah. To what extent, Carmiel, does the answer hinge on the election here in the U.S.? Much has been said about Joe Biden's deteriorating relationship, if there's anything left between him and Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think the personal relationship between Netanyahu and Biden may be degrading over time, as is the case with really everyone who has to deal with Bibi Netanyahu. But at the same time, the relationship between the countries and the administrations remains very strong. And we see that, again, in the context of this Iranian strike. While on the one hand, the U.S. had been calling for Israel to really kind of step back from the brink, at the same time, when it comes to the battlefield, they are there to defend them. The U.S. is going to give Israel the space that it needs. Now, that doesn't mean that Netanyahu doesn't have his eye on the elections in the U.S. and will be looking for how he can get the best possible deal and the most support that he thinks he can get as he moves forward in the region.
Carmiel, how important is the Jewish calendar right now, high holidays, and what might come next?
Yeah, the Jewish calendar is, of course, very important. I think that many Israelis went into the new year, the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, with the hope of leaving behind them the tragedies of the year past, and instead find themselves on the precipice of yet another larger scale war, another conflict on a new front. And I think that that is really trying for Israel and the Israeli people. I do think that we're going to see quiet because of the holidays and in between the holidays, but I would not expect to see quiet throughout the holiday season, which is to say the Jewish holidays are going to be taking place throughout October. And I would expect that the moments they pause, we will see greater action on the part of the Israelis.